You probably know your closest friend's relationship history better than you know their salary. You know who broke their heart in college. You know the situationship that lasted 2 years too long. You know the one they still haven't quite gotten over, but you have no idea what they earn. You might have a rough guess, a range, something you piece together from where they live and what they order at dinner and whether they always seem fine when the bill comes. But the actual number? They have never said it. You have never asked. And somehow, without ever discussing it, you both agreed that was the right arrangement. This is one of the strangest features of modern life. We will talk about almost anything before we talk about money. We will talk about our bodies, our relationships, our mental health, our regrets, our fears. But the number on our payslip, the balance in our account, the amount of debt we're carrying, that stays private. Always, with almost everyone. And the silence is so complete, so universal, that most people have never stopped to ask why. The taboo is not ancient. For most of human history, money was not something people hid. In small communities, everyone had a rough sense of what everyone else had because resources were visible. The size of your harvest, the condition of your roof, the number of animals in your field. Relative wealth was something you could see. You did not need to ask. That changed as economies industrialized. Wages replaced barter. Wealth became abstract, a number written in a ledger rather than grain you could hold. And somewhere in that transition, a new norm appeared. Talking about money was vulgar. Asking about someone else's income was rude. The reasoning, where anyone bothered to articulate it, was something about dignity, about not reducing a person to a number. But there was a second reason. One that the people who benefited from the silence never quite said out loud. Picture a factory floor sometime in the early 20th century. Two men doing the same job, same hours, same output. One earns $12 a week. The other earns $9. They have no idea, because they do not talk about it. Because they have been taught somehow that it is not done. The moment they compare notes, the manager has a problem. So the silence is useful. Not for the workers, for the people setting the numbers. This was not a conspiracy. It did not need to be. It was just a norm that happened to be very convenient for one side of the table. And it spread into offices, into professional culture, into the story we tell ourselves about why discretion is a virtue. Most of us inherited it without ever choosing it. We absorbed it somewhere between childhood and adulthood, and now we enforce it without thinking. We change the subject. We give non-answers. We say, it's enough, or I can't complain, or not as much as I'd like. And the other person nods, because they were taught the same evasion. The norm is self-reinforcing. Nobody breaks it, so nobody breaks it. Here is what the silence costs. The most obvious cost is financial. Studies consistently find that salary transparency, even partial, imperfect transparency, narrows pay gaps. When people know what their peers earn, they negotiate better. They discover when they are being underpaid. They make better decisions about which jobs to take, which offers to accept, which markets to enter. The person who stays silent, who plays by the old rules, who never asks and never tells, they lose that information. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way they can point to, but over a career, the compounding effect of under-negotiating, of not knowing, of never having the data, it is enormous. But the financial cost is only part of it. There is also the isolation. Think about the last time you had a bad money month. Not a crisis, just a month where something went wrong. A bill you forgot. A purchase that made sense at the time and didn't. An expense that showed up and quietly wrecked the calculation you had been running in your head. You probably did not tell anyone. Maybe you did not open your banking app for a few days. Not because you forgot, but because you did not want to see the number. Maybe you said yes to dinner knowing you shouldn't, because saying no would require an explanation, and the explanation would require a conversation you did not know how to start. Maybe you just carried it, that low, specific weight of a financial mistake you couldn't share, and waited for the month to end. That is what the silence costs in the small version. Multiplied across years, across every big decision. The apartment, the career change, the relationship, the choice you made without knowing if you could actually afford what came next. The weight gets heavier, and you carry it alone, because there is no language for it. The conversation was preemptively closed before it started. And so you sit across from your friend, the one you've known for a decade, the one you would call at 2 in the morning, and the thing that is quietly shaping every major decision of your adult life never comes up. You talk about everything else, and you go home still carrying the one thing you didn't say. The silence does something else, too, something subtler. It makes comparison worse. You already know that comparison is a problem, but comparison requires information. And in the absence of real information, the brain fills the gap with the worst possible data source, the curated surface of other people's lives. You don't know what your friend earns, but you saw where they went on vacation. You don't know what your colleague's finances look like, but you saw what car they drive. You don't know what your sibling's net worth is, but they just bought a house, so clearly they have something figured out that you don't. You are comparing your internal reality, your actual numbers, your actual stress, your actual uncertainty, to other people's external presentation. And their external presentation is, by design, the highlight reel, the part that was chosen for visibility. When no one talks about money, everyone performs money. You perform having it together. They perform having it together. And both of you go home having confirmed, once again, that everyone else is doing better than you are. The taboo creates exactly the conditions that make comparison most painful and most distorted. There is a version of this that plays out in relationships, and it is worth sitting with. Couples who never talk about money before committing to a shared life together are not being romantic. They are making a bet. They are betting that whatever differences exist in their financial histories, their spending instincts, their relationship to debt, their long-term goals, those differences will resolve themselves somehow, or at least not become the thing that breaks them. That bet does not pay off very often. Money is one of the leading sources of conflict in long-term relationships. Not because couples disagree about numbers, but because they disagree about meaning. Because one person grew up in a household where money was tight and therefore terrifying, and the other grew up in a household where money was fluid and therefore easy, and neither of them ever said that out loud, and now they are arguing about whether to book the nice hotel, and the argument is not really about the hotel. The conversation they needed to have was early, before the lease, before the joint account, before the decision that made it complicated to leave. But the taboo made it feel impossible to have then, and now the same taboo makes it feel dangerous to have now, and so it doesn't happen and the silence grows. There are people who figured out a different way. Not loudly, not as a statement, just quietly in one conversation with one person, they decided to stop pretending. Here is what that conversation often looks like. Two friends, mid-20s or early 30s, close enough to know each other's relationship history in detail. One of them, tired of performing, says the number out loud. Their actual salary. Just says it, without softening it or qualifying it or making it into a question. There is a pause. Maybe 3 seconds. Maybe 5. And then the other person says theirs. And then something shifts. Because now they are talking about something real. One of them is earning more than the other expected. The other is paying more in rent than anyone knew. They had both been making assumptions, performing stability, performing fine, and neither of those performances was accurate. They had been comparing notes based on fictions. The conversation that follows is different from every conversation they've had before. They talk about what they're stressed about whether their career moves actually make financial sense, about debt, about savings, about the gap between what they thought their 30s would look like and what they actually look like. They do not post it. They do not perform it. They just talk. And the thing almost everyone describes after a conversation like this is the same. Relief. Not because the numbers were what they hoped. Sometimes they weren't. But the relief of not having to perform. The relief of being known accurately by someone who matters. The relief of realizing that the other person's situation was not what you imagined. That they had their own uncertainty, their own bad months, their own version of the thing you thought only you were carrying. The money conversation, when it finally happens, almost never goes the way people fear. It is awkward for about 30 seconds. And then it is just a conversation, like any other, about a part of life that is genuinely important. This is not an argument for telling everyone everything. Context matters. There are situations where transparency is strategic and situations where it is not. There are relationships where it makes sense and relationships where it doesn't. But there is something worth noticing in the fact that the silence is so total, so unexamined, so automatic. That we enforce a norm we never chose. That we protect a taboo that mostly serves people who are not us. The people closest to you, the ones who know your history, your fears, your worst decisions, your best intentions, they are probably navigating the same financial life you are. The same uncertainty. The same gap between what they expected adulthood to feel like and what it actually feels like. The same quiet wondering about whether they are doing this right. They just haven't said it. And neither have you. That is the money conversation nobody has. Not because it is impossible, but because we were all taught without being taught that it wasn't allowed. It is allowed.